was trying to think about why I started traveling and keep going to exotic places, and I think probably the first reason is my grandmother, that grandmother, my father's mother. I used to spend quite a bit of time with her. I'd take the train up to Leicester when I was just a little kid and spend time in the summer with her. And she was a great reader, loved to read to me, and read Robinson Crusoe to me, for instance, which is a book about a guy that gets stranded on a desert island and he has nothing and he thinks he's all alone on this island. And he makes do with things. He figures things out. You know, I can use this leaf as a sunshade. I can use this stick to dig something. I can build a little bower out of branches. I can figure out how to catch fish. So he was very resourceful in a foreign land that was foreign to him. So I thought that was pretty cool, and was one of the earliest books I remember, and it was an independent, adventurous person. So, and she read to me something called Swallows and Amazons, which every time she read it to me, I said, "Oh, read it, please read another chapter, please, you have to go on." And it was about, I don't really remember exactly what it was, but it was something about seafaring, going to sea, and somewhere exotic. Another reason I think maybe I like travel is because at this house in Porton, where I told you where I grew up, and there were all these people who worked with my father who used to come in through the house and stay sometimes. And there was one guy from New Zealand, and he was in the Air Force. I didn't know anything about New Zealand, but he talked to me about New Zealand. And it was just kind of exotic, a faraway place. And I think I had measles. At that time, you got very, very, very sick with measles. And, or maybe it was the chicken pox, whatever it was, he gave me, he had a banana. He had flown in and he had a banana. And I don't know that I'd ever seen a banana, tasted a banana. So that's very exotic. And he also gave me a koala bear, stuffed koala bear, which I guess don't live in New Zealand, but he found it somewhere in Australia. And somewhere in my early childhood, we had a calendar that had a picture of the Taj Mahal in it. And I always thought, someday I want to go see the Taj Mahal. So I have seen it. It was a cloudy day. It wasn't as beautiful as the picture. In fact, it poured for a moment. And so I think that, and then my 7th grade geography teacher, Mrs. Lapham, I don't know if she's Miss or Mrs., but she did go off on these exotic vacations to places with strange sounding names and talk to us about them when she came back. So I just guess I was open to those things. And for a lot of my childhood, I was an only child because my brother was 6.5 years younger. So maybe I had an imagination. I don't know, but I like the idea of going places and seeing new things. I was curious. So my mother sent me a few things that she had in her memory box, and this letter to accompany them. And she said, "Excuse the paper, but I'm writing as I'm going through the pictures as things come to mind. Regarding the handkerchief, you, Maria, were half named after the girl who gave it to me, who died very young, 19, of TB, as her mother did at 20. The other half comes from another Maria, in whose home village your father and I watched the guy make an ashtray that you should remember, blue with flowers. That Maria was shot with her 2 small twins, 2 to 3 years old, by Germans for hiding U.S. pliers. Well, named for a dead person and another dead person. So I was born in 1940. The war was started in Europe, was getting to England. And so we moved out to the countryside to this little village named Porton. Porton was about 6 miles, either 6 miles or 12 miles from Salisbury, where the famous cathedral is, not too far from Stonehenge. So we're in southwest of London. And we lived in what appeared to me to be a huge white house on top of a hill. And my father worked at a camp. It was an airfield and also a secret biological warfare lab. And my father was a biologist, but he was working on germ warfare to fight this war. And so we did not experience the war in that village because it was just a little village. And I don't know if they ever bombed the little airport, but my father was in the Home Guard. You know, he had to make sure that we all had our blackout blinds down, you know, after dark, and he had to spot airplanes. He was on duty one night a week or something in our little village. Now, I don't remember this, but I was told this, and I believe it. We had a field behind our house, big hay field, sometimes cows. And he was taking me out for a walk one sunny afternoon, and the German planes would sometimes come over the countryside in England, and they were called hedge hoppers because they came down really low, and they had machine guns, and they would go so low that they were practically hopping over the hedges. That's a little poetic license, but that's what they call them. And so we're out walking, and one of these things comes along, and he threw me into a haystack and covered me with his body, and bullets were splashing around. Now, I don't remember that, but he certainly remembers that, and my mother remembers that. So that was one wartime experience I'm glad I don't remember personally. But at one point, my mother had a friend in London and wanted to go visit her and took me, and my brother was not alive yet. He was not alive during the war because he's 6.5 years younger than I am. Anyway, she took me to London to see her friend, and they put me in a bedroom in the back, and the crib was right by a window. And I do remember looking out that window and hearing and seeing bombs falling. This was a time when they had those rockets that made a scary sound when they came. They were rockets, but they were like bombs because they exploded. But before they exploded, they made a very scary whistling sound. So it was partially psychological. B1s, I think they were called. And so I heard those, and they were in the distance. They weren't right near my window. But I could see fires burning, and I could hear bombs falling. I could hear this whistling, and I was afraid. And I went out, you know, little girls in England were supposed to be seen and not heard. And I knew that. And I was kind of afraid to go out and say, "Mommy." And so, but I did. And they took pity on me, and they put me on the couch between them, covered me with like an Afghan kind of thing. And they went on talking. And it was so amazing to me that they were talking grown-up talk with me in the room. And I didn't go to sleep because I was still scared and I was still listening. And I don't know what they were talking about, but these were grown-ups talking as if I wasn't in the room.